But that is our good friend Tony Perkins and his team there at the Family Research Council in Washington on Capitol Hill. Nobody fights for righteousness and Christian morality more than the guys at the Family Research Council. Tony, good morning to you.
Good morning, Tim. How are you and Ed doing this morning?
We're doing great, man.
Doing good.
We're
I waved to you this morning as I flew across. I don't know if you saw me or not.
Yeah, you spend most of your time you spend half your time in Baton Rouge, which is your hometown, and then you work there at the FRC leading them in Washington, D.C. So, yeah, you flew right over the top of Tupelo there on the way. Hey, Tony, I want to ask you, I just wanted to get you, and I haven't even talked about this recently. I wanted to get your thoughts on what do you anticipate this week? Is it 50-50, you would say, in terms of which way the court will go on upholding marriage or not?
You know, it's really hard to say, Tim, and I'm very hesitant to
speculate,
give any kind of speculation because you go back to the health care law, which appeared to be a slam dunk in terms of the Constitution and what the court might do, and then we see that they did completely opposite of what most people thought. So, you know, going into this, I would think they're going to be hard-pressed to overturn California's Prop 8. That would have serious ramifications, I think, for I really think the legitimacy of the court to undermine what the voters of California did. I do think there's a much better chance that they would overturn the portion of DOMA that relates to the federal government. That's what was challenged before the court. They may even find a way out there saying that the Congress didn't have standing or that the court can't decide the issue because it did not have an adversarial position, and you didn't have two people clearly debating it because the administration stepped away from it. So it's really hard to say what's going to happen.
And, you know, Tony, this is Ed, by the way. One of the things that kind of gets lost in what's happened is the fact when it comes to the Defense of Marriage Act, you had an administration charged with defending congressional law in the court. And then in the Proposition 8 case, you had a governor and attorney general in that state who said, we're not going to defend the vote in court. I'm maybe not just as concerned about that, but I am concerned with the fact that you have a Democratic administration and a Republican administration in California who says it doesn't matter if it's law, we're going to punt. We're not going to defend it in court. This is kind of scary, this kind of pick and choose what we're going to defend and what we're going to uphold.
Well, Ed, that's called lawlessness. I mean, essentially that's what it is. You've got elected officials who are creating their own law and just ignoring what was duly passed by, in the case of California, the people, and in DOMA, the federal government, by Congress, and signed by a president.
Well, Tony, it's still, even though the trend has been, especially in these liberal states, to allow for homosexual marriage, still overwhelmingly, what is the score? 32?
Well, you've got 30 states that have passed marriage amendments to their Constitution. You've got, I think, 38 states that have either a constitutional or statutory definition of marriage. This is a part of this. I know if you go back and the week before last, Pew Research Center released a poll, or a survey rather, I think it was the first of last week, a week ago, saying that the stories surrounding the time frame that the court took up the oral arguments on marriage and making their decision, the stories in favor of same-sex marriage were 5-1. There's this idea that this is inevitable. That's what they want to present, this idea that it's inevitable. I think it was certainly to influence the court and the American people. But the reason they're trying to make it appear to be inevitable is because time is not on their side. They need the court to impose this on the entire nation, because the more time that it takes for them to push their agenda, the more Americans will realize the unintended consequences of this. This is not just about the marriage altar. This is about fundamentally altering America. Religious liberty, parental rights, free speech, all of that goes by the wayside if we embrace this notion of redefining natural marriage.
Talking to Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council, as we've been talking about, folks, this is a very important week at the Supreme Court and for our country, because the Supreme Court will release their decisions on both the Defense of Marriage Act, which is a federal law signed in 1996, passed by the Congress, Republican Congress, and then signed by a Democrat president, Bill Clinton, defining marriage for the federal government as between one man and one woman. And then also they're going to decide on the Proposition 8 case, which was the 2008 decision by the people of California to uphold the definition of marriage as between a man and a woman for their state constitution. And you may remember that that was overturned by a federal judge, one federal judge who was himself a homosexual, didn't recuse himself, but overturned the votes. One federal judge overturned the votes of 7 million people. 7 million people voted in California now, the land of fruits and nuts, where they, no disrespect to I guess I can't take that back, I'm going to go with it.
Kind of hard to cover that one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with it. Land of fruits and nuts. I'm just kidding. But you know what I'm saying. It is a liberal state. There are some good conservative people there.
Right.
But it is a liberal state, overwhelmingly. California is. And yet they still voted to uphold marriage there as between a man and a woman. So that's what's made its way now finally to the Supreme Court. The case was heard in March, and the decisions will be announced any day now. And we were talking to Tony about the ramifications of that. And Tony, I also want to ask you, what do you think, looking out for the next year or two, 3 years perhaps, in terms of the Christian community in this country that wants to defend natural marriage, and also wants to who believes in Romans chapter 1, among other biblical verses, that homosexuality is sin? Are we going to be able to believe that teaching anymore without being, hauled off to jail?
Well, you certainly can believe it. I do think there's coming a choice, whether or not that happens immediately, that we have to choose between not only believing Scripture but living according to it and being prosecuted by our government. The time frame which that happens, I'm not certain. But clearly we're already seeing those that hold to a biblical view of morality are being marginalized and stigmatized with the intention of silencing them in the public square. So, it's going to have it's going to be a clear and present danger to the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion in our country. In fact, I preached on that yesterday as I spoke in my home church, anticipating this decision by the court, actually quoting from Romans chapter 1. And I think increasingly that churches that believe the Bible, believe it is true and it is the Word of God, are going to challenge the culture and are going to stand firmly on it. And I do not think, Tim, Ed, I don't think that the true church is going to go away quietly. I can assure you of that.
No, and I agree with you, but I do think we've seen self-censorship on the part of many in the evangelical churches, even, who, they start with Romans chapter 2 in their in their study of book of Romans, because they're too skittish to deal with the issues. Well, go ahead.
You're going to have to edit out a lot more than just the first chapter of Romans.
I know.
You're going to have to go throughout the New Testament and begin to extract references to homosexuality, sexual immorality, and the likes, and including Jesus' own words about what marriage is, quoting back to Genesis. So you're going to have to take out a lot to facilitate this agenda of those that want to redefine natural marriage.
Tony, we're just down to a couple of minutes left. A lot of people have accused us, I'm sure have accused you as well, as of being obsessed with this issue. But to me, it has always been an issue that was the hot spot in the battle between the secular movement and the traditional Judeo-Christian foundation of this nation, that's what this issue represented. And so sexual liberty versus religious liberty was just the latest outbreak of hostility between those two worldviews. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, nobody. I don't think anybody that I know that I work with wanted this battle or this debate. In fact, I spent about the first 10 years of my public policy career as a legislator working on policies to promote marriage, and I was happy to continue to do that as the author of the nation's first covenant marriage law. But they began attacking marriage, trying to fundamentally redefine what it was. And so we couldn't ignore this threat. We had to address it, and we have to continue to address it. We don't address it solely. We have other issues to deal with, but simply because we're responding to their attacks does not make us the aggressor as they would like it to be portrayed.
No, and Tony, we talked about this too. It isn't necessarily that you're going to see a mass influx of, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, and Qs.
Yeah.
Who are wanting to that's the letter they use, folks, to describe themselves. Is GLBT, whatever it is. Anyway, they add a letter a week, seems like. But the point is that this is going to be something that, that is going to be used to try to change textbooks, for instance.
Right.
There's going to be ramifications way beyond the people actually physically going down and wanting to get married at the courthouse. Right. Tony, thanks so much for your time. FRC.org, and join Tony in the afternoons on AFR Talk for Washington Watch at 4 o'clock Central Time on American Family.
All right, Tim, you and Ed have a great week.
Take care, Tony. See you. All right.